Hello, this is Venice McNeil, and the following might be one of the most important interviews I have ever done. But I will warn you, it is a difficult one. And it is difficult for several reasons. The first being is that I am interviewing an esteemed and learned physician who goes into a lot of medical jargon, and it takes a while to get to the point. And even having read his book, I was overwhelmed by the detail he gave me at times. And so it requires patience to get the payoff, but it's worth it. Now, the next thing that's challenging is that we're talking about COVID. This was not intentional, as I really only wanted to talk about the brain function, because as you know, at Magical Egypt, we're obsessed with the brain because of the schematics that we've found in ancient Egyptian art and architecture. And the bottom line is I wanted to become enlightened about the function of these brain parts and the reason why the ancients possibly encoded them into art. But it didn't go that way. So the fact that we're talking about COVID causes a challenge because, as the title of his book makes clear, The Indoctrinated Brain, we have been indoctrinated. And this means that we will have a huge amount of cognitive dissonance around what he is trying to tell us. But rest assured, he is no quack. He is a learned physician and part of a Nobel Prize-winning research team. That being said, you may become triggered. But if you stay till the end, you will see that that is on purpose. But what is the most difficult, frankly, is that to believe him, you must be willing to accept the world is evil, that there is a malevolence so great that it is literally beyond imagination. And this evil is focused on you. Yes, you and your family and friends. It's an evil that is global in scale, organized, and ruthless. So let's start with a brief summary. In summary, then, Dr. Nehls emphasizes the role of the hippocampus in instant and long-term memory formation, our autobiographical memory, which in turn shapes our personality, linking its neurogenesis, which is the process by which new neurons are formed in the brain, to psychological resilience, curiosity, and cognitive function, ultimately labeling the hippocampal neurogenesis system as the mental immune system. Dr. Nehls highlights the interconnectedness of the mental immune system in navigating new challenges like COVID and how we deal with threats. As the hippocampus undergoes advanced shrinkage, the self-preservation system is more likely to collapse. A society grappling with mental exhaustion faces immediate threats of rising depression rates and long-term challenges with increasing Alzheimer's cases. Mental fatigue can erode an individual's capacity for independent thought, even in seemingly healthy states. This decline in mental well-being may contribute to societal compliance with restrictive measures, as a fatigued population might succumb to irrational fears. Additionally, a weakened psychological resistance and a fragile ego makes individuals more susceptible to following the crowd, even when it leads them towards potential peril. Dr. Nehls explains the mental immune system closely interacts with the physical immune system, involving brain cells that monitor and respond to threats like viruses or even stress. Activation of receptors like the TLR4 triggers an overproduction of pro-inflammatory cytokines, the very same ones that are involved in what we call a cytokine storm in severe COVID. These cytokines are crucial for the brain's defense, but they also inhibit the hippocampus, and mental processes. Chronic activation, as seen in ongoing stress, the type created by the constant bombardment by mass media, can detrimentally affect mental health and cognitive function. As a result of our lifestyles, all humans on the planet are basically suffering from cognitive degeneration, from insufficient neurogenesis anyway. And so when COVID hit, instead of curiosity and independent thinking, or as he calls it, system 2 thinking, we resorted to fear, compliance, and reflexivity, or what he calls system 1 thinking. The bottom line is that a comprised mental immune system leaves individuals susceptible to manipulation and societal control. And this highlights the importance of bolstering mental resilience to navigate our current challenges. Dr. Nehls talks about a problem that arises from the bombardment of life-threatening narratives, which force people to adapt to ever-changing regulations. The constant influx of information led to the overwriting of existing memories, resulting in a loss of individuality and personality over time, and also leaving people vulnerable to manipulation. As a result, humanity risks entering a state akin to the dystopian societies depicted in Brave New World, devoid of historical context and mental resilience. Dr. Nehls highlights the importance of nutrients like vitamin D and lithium in bolstering both mental and physical immunity, especially in mitigating COVID-19 symptoms, due to their crucial role in inhibiting neuroinflammation and supporting brain health. Now, despite its efficacy, societal recognition and accessibility of lithium remains inadequate, hindering its widespread use as a vital micronutrient. Now, here I do interject and explain how it's almost as if they want us to die. And he suggests a deliberate suppression of this knowledge in order to override our personalities or operating systems. Just like a computer, you need to wipe the disk if you want to install a new operating system, making it easier for them to install. A great reset. One thing he talks about in the book that we did not cover here is that these emotional narratives that overwrite your memories become part of your personality. And this explains why people are so triggered if you question a narrative. It's because you are challenging their overwritten personality. Another thing he talks about in the book is Gates' investment into hippocampus research. I'll just leave that there for you to think about. So now we've got that out of the way, here is my interview with Dr. Michael Nehls, the author of The Indoctrinated Brain. A friend sent it to me, and then I sent it to friends, and I'm just so very happy to see the reaction that you're getting as well. So congratulations.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Yeah, it's nice in a way, but it's also kind of threatening. But I knew already when I wrote the book, my wife, who is kind of doing the lectorate on the book, usually the first, she actually got real kind of what it's called in English. Yeah, she has ear problems since then, you know, pressure in the ear. She couldn't read a whole section at a time because she had to stop and said it's just too much. And yeah, of course, also fearing for the family and everything. It's not something you have to take lightly if you yeah, reveal some thoughts about what's going on.
Have you had any indication that you are in fact being monitored or scrutinized or?
Well, what actually happened was that my Wikipedia account, which was pristine until like 6 weeks ago, about 8 weeks ago, suddenly got kind of certain accusations, but simply only opinions about me, and nothing that is of any scientific validity or substance. And when I asked Corwin and some other geeks who know how to work with Wikipedia to essentially correct that, and send valid peer-reviewed papers for myself and also from others which confirm my theories. They were in there for a day and then they were removed again. So only the opinions are allowed about me, which are negative, but any correction or thought about scientific evidence was not permitted.
Here's the thing. If you look at, for example, the recent Putin interview or news stories, either way, right? What is a beautiful thing is that a very large section of the population sees through those games, right? They're starting to wake up and they're seeing through, Wikipedia and fact checking and all of these. There's a new interview that you should watch that's just mind blowing. It is, again, Tucker Carlson talking about the censorship industry in the United States and how they deployed it against Germany. And they didn't use it in Brexit. And that was when they decided we can't have this happening. So now they've deployed it in the United States. Like the whole thing is such a mess, darling. It's such a mess.
Yeah,
So the times that we live in, we're blessed to live in interesting times.
absolutely, yeah. Days, it's really exciting, when you wake up in the morning, there's always something new on the table.
Yes.
But by the way, Tucker Carlson invited me, so yeah,
Darling, that is amazing.
we'll meet him in exactly 9 days. Yeah, I'm already preparing. Also, I'm invited to the U.S. Senate, not by the Senate itself, but by an international, what's called International Crisis Symposium or something, which is happening in Washington, and so I have to give a speech there in 5 days. So,
Look, I am so surprised that you were on Alex and you were on the War Room and now Tucker. I mean, it's really wonderful that you haven't been closed out. You know what I mean? It really is incredibly encouraging. But I'm so excited about Tucker. That's going to be amazing. Where are you going to go?
Well, I'm flying over, and he has his studio or whatever in somewhere in Florida. So yeah,
Oh, darling, you're going to sell so many books.
I'm not sure, but we'll see.
I'm sure.
It was
Honestly,
actually
look.
amazing. I was in the War Room, and then a few hours later, the book was on number 8 at Amazon. So that really from, I don't know, 5,000 to 8 down, it was really amazing how quickly that happened.
So what do you do next? What do you do after this?
After what do you mean? After this book, or?
Yeah, are you going to do another book? I mean, do you have plans? Like,
Actually,
where do you go from this?
I'm already working on a book, and I published already parts of it because I think it's very important that people know about this. And it's the goal is to change something that is currently not acceptable, and that is that an essential trace element, which is required for our physical and mental immune system, is not accepted as an essential trace element. It's not even accepted as a potential trace element, potentially essential, even though it is essential. It's essential for all animals on this planet, except humans, according to the World Health Organization. And the funny thing is that with this trace element in trace doses, you can actually interrupt or stop long COVID.
What is it, darling?
Lithium.
Okay.
Now,
Wow.
my Substack, you will find a whole article I published about this. I wanted to wait actually until I have written the book. It would be a chapter in my book, but I thought it's more important to inform people than to sell books at the moment.
Yeah.
So I pushed forward, and I gave a lot of interviews on that. Actually, the War Room, not the War Room, but Highwire invited me to Austin to talk about this for an hour, about this topic. And here in Germany, it's already changing things. I get so much feedback from doctors who give people with long COVID and post-vac the lithium, and the results are amazing. But it's not only for this type of disease, since it stops essentially inflammatory processes. It's essentially for every human disease.
Inflammation is such a huge problem. I mean, indeed, right?
It's chronic
it is
inflammation is the cause of almost all circulatory diseases, and lithium is a natural key element essentially to stop this vicious cycle of inflammation, which is essentially self-fulfilling, and that it interferes with one central signal transducer, GSK3 beta, and it also has some additional functions in the body. And so, for example, it's the only substance that can stop Alzheimer's at microdose.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So this book I'm going to write, whenever I will have the time, which is not happening so quickly, unfortunately.
Darling, you're doing God's work at the moment. So I think we're going to give you a little bit of space to take time for the next book because, as I said, your book was revelatory to me. And, in one respect, you talk about the human, the human immune system, the mental immune system. And I think one of the problems is that people don't have a comprehension for the evil that is active in our world. And your book, when you talk about the Gates research and all of that kind of thing, it really brings into focus that this is not an accident. You know what I mean? That there are people out there that really do want to harm us. But I could talk to you forever, and I want to be very aware of your time because I know how busy you are. So, darling, why don't you give me a brief synopsis of who you are?
Okay. Well, I'm a medical doctor, and also have a PhD in molecular genetics, meaning that I worked on the discovery of inherited diseases. And the key discovery for my PhD work was a regulatory element which regulates genes in immune cells, which are necessary for adaptive immune system. So without this gene, we would not be able to adapt to any virus or any pathogen, or we were not even able to eliminate cancer cells in our body. So this was a key finding, and it was actually honored by the American Society for Immunology as one of the pillars of immunology in my work. And so I got my PhD in discovering genes that I inherited. And from that, I actually started a company where we offered to the industry ways to explore the functionality of the genome, with the idea to find a gene that essentially is kind of the magic bullet for eternal health. Of course, I couldn't find that. It was a dream that was shattered dramatically when I realized that I myself need this magic bullet, because being a PhD, being a chief science officer of the company and the CEO for several years really took some harm on my body and my mind. I became obese and slept not well, and had very bad blood measures and was close to a heart attack. Realized I have to change my lifestyle, and when I did this after a half a year, my doctor looked at me after he looked at the data and said, "Did you fall in the fountain of youth?" And when he said this to me, that was really a traumatic event, because I was trying to find the fountain of youth in the genome, and I realized that it was already there. It's just my lifestyle that didn't allow me to get access to it. And so from that point on, everything changed, and I decided I stopped this kind of research, and instead of going deeper and deeper into the genome, I tried to find out how the genes are interacting, all of them, to essentially provide us with this eternal health. at least health to the highest age. And so once I realized that what needs to be done to stay healthy, I realized I want to change now everything, and started to write my first book about this. And from this book, many others followed. And I realized with this insight, we can essentially get rid of diseases like Alzheimer's. So I published my first paper on that. It's called Unified Theory of Alzheimer's Disease. And that was actually the basis also to understand what's going on when COVID started, because everything that you need to essentially avoid the development of Alzheimer's was simply reversed by the measures in 2020. And even worse, the inflammation that is caused by the spike protein, which was manufactured in a way to essentially invade the brain, to cross the blood-brain barrier, is a key key molecule to create chronic inflammation in the brain. And chronic inflammation in the brain is a hallmark of depression and Alzheimer's. And while I was working on that, I also developed the idea that the mental energy that people need is also residing somewhere in the brain. And I had an idea already 10 years ago when I read my first book, the first book that Daniel Kahneman published, the Nobel Prize winner in 2002, about this the two different systems we have in the brain to react to outside situations. One he called System 1, which is our reflective kind of system, very quick and always active, but not very good if we have to come up with new decisions. And the decision-making system that really gives us the ability to think is System 2. And this is not always turned on. It requires energy. It's essentially has a problem of what we call ego depletion. There's only a limited amount of energy available to use it any given day. And so I set out to identify this energy source, and found it actually in the production of new nerve cells in our autobiographical memory center. And that was exactly the center that was under attack by the measures and by the virus and the vaccine, of course, which I wouldn't call vaccine, but more like a spiking program. And so when everything came together, the immunological experience, the experience on the autoimmune, on the autobiographical memory center, which with all its functionalities, I essentially named the mental immune system. And when I realized that the mental immune system is under attack, that's when I had decided that I have to write another book. Actually, I was actually finished at the time. I didn't want to write another book, actually, because I said to my wife, I think all what is necessary is out there now. I mean, nature will not change very dramatically in the next 100 years. And everything that nature, what we need, that we are in line with our human nature's demands, is essentially in my books already. So every additional book would be, a waste of my time and the waste of the time of my readers. So that just any book of my books is essentially good enough to give the information required to have a long-lasting life without major diseases. Of course, you always have to have some luck, but everything was written. And when I realized what was going on in 2020 and 2021 with the demands on us to get these injections, I realized I have to write another book. It was important.
Darling, why don't we move into the mechanism of the hippocampus, the index neurons, and the memory? So tell me that story. Tell me how the system works and how the measures during COVID attacked that.
Yeah, when we talk about the immune system, the mental immune system, even its existence, we can go back actually, maybe millions of the years, and ask ourselves how evolution works. And evolution has essentially only one idea. It means it has one imperative, and that is be fruitful and multiply. And to be fruitful and to multiply, let's say lower organisms, they just are fruitful and multiply and defend themselves with the immune cells and other measures. But in humans, we have a different way to be successful. We don't produce millions of offspring. We just produce a few, if we are lucky. And we have to make sure that they arrive into adulthood to be fruitful and multiply again. And for that, we need another immune system, an immune system that not only defends us against pathogenic microorganisms, but also against potentially pathogenic macroorganisms, also larger organisms. And our defense here is essentially our experience. This is also how we adapt to changes in the environment. We don't, let's say, if the floods are coming and the ocean rises, we will not get gills, and we will not develop gills, even though we had them in our embryonic development. We will not reactivate them and be able to live underwater. What we do is, as humans, we react to changes in our environment by technological means, meaning by cultural means. And cultural development is essentially the consequence of our mental immune system at work. The mental immune system is essentially our ability to see and to observe, to have experience, combine the observation with our experience, be creative based on our individuality, our individual experiences, and come up with solutions. And if these solutions are valuable, then other humans as social learning machines, better than any other being in the universe, of our known universe, we are able to learn from others very efficiently. So if one person develops an iPhone, then not a second one has to do it. We all learn, okay, that's a good thing. We can do many things with it. So people adapt. And so learning, being curious, learning instantly, because if people tell us something, we don't have to get the story a second, a third, or fourth time to learn it. We learn it immediately. Even our own thoughts, the development of our own thoughts in our brain, when we think about things, we have to have the ability to remember what we thought as reference, so that we can go back to our initial thoughts, to intermediate thoughts, and then come up maybe with the best thought that we put into a plan. And we have to keep this plan for long term and adapt. And all these kind of functionalities require one key function in our brain. That's the ability to memorize things instantaneously and long term. And the only part of our brain which can do that is the hippocampus. Hippocampus stands for, is essentially translated into seahorse. It's a seahorse type shape structure. We have two of them here. They are situated here in the temporal lobe, deep under the neocortex. They belong to the very old part of our brain. We call it arched cortex. Even birds have a similar structure already, so it's very early in the evolution. It was necessary for animals, vertebrates particularly, to learn where they have experienced something, what they have experienced, how it felt, and have a timestamp essentially when, and a local stamp where it happened. So in order to find a tree again where there might be interesting fruits, or to know where an enemy might have his cave and avoid the place. So this memory center, the hippocampus, is very old structure. And in order to learn lifelong, particularly in humans, it has the ability to grow. And that's very unique in the brain. It's the only part of the brain that can produce new nerve cells on a daily basis. And these nerve cells are required to create an index of all the information that we learn during the day. Even our own thoughts need to be indexed for later retrieval. And so without this production, we wouldn't be able to produce index neurons, and without these index neurons, our mental capacity would shrink. The index neurons, as I found out in a paper I published in 2016, Unified Theory of Alzheimer's Disease, I show that these index neurons are essentially the key to understand Alzheimer's. So if you reduce the production of these cells, first, you are more likely to develop depression because these cells are the neuronal correlate of psychological resilience. Later, it was found out they are also the neuronal correlate for curiosity. So, for example, in animals, if you remove the production side of these cells, they are not curious anymore. They completely lose, in rodents, for example, rodents lose completely their natural curiosity, which is called novelty finding. They essentially sit around, but they are not exploring their surroundings anymore, which would be natural and necessary for survival. Essentially, if you reduce the production of these cells, you are not curious anymore, and you lose or reduce your psychological resilience, meaning every stressful event can create a depression-like situation. And what I've shown, and I'm currently publishing a paper on that, I hope it will be accepted, is that these nerve cells, these new produced nerve cells, by the process which is actually called adult hippocampal neurogenesis, adult because it's the only site in our brain where in adults new nerve cells are produced. Production of nerve cells is neurogenesis, and of course it takes place in the hippocampus. So the adult hippocampal neurogenesis is also providing the source of the mental energy that we need for thinking. It's quite easy to understand. Without the production of new nerve cells, our brain doesn't wanna think, because every new thought would essentially cannot be recorded, except you would override pre-existing thoughts and ideas, and even reduce your individuality because former memories would be overwritten. So this is one of the reasons we feel ego depleted after a long, exhausting day, because all the index neurons that have been produced overnight are essentially used up, and the ones which are generated during the day are also used up, and we need to recover from that, even either taking a short break or better a longer break, and best is actually to sleep. What I realized is that these connected functions, curiosity, resilience, psychological resilience, which essentially are two sides of the same coin. If you are curious, you enter new spaces, either physically or mentally. And if you enter these new spaces, everything that is new is by default also potentially dangerous, and you are not willing to enter new space if you don't have resilience. So, and that's why, for example, mice or rodents, when you remove the production of these new nerve cells, the adult hippocampal neurogenesis, stay on one place. They don't move anymore. They don't want to roam around and explore new territory, even though it would be harmful for them not doing it, because otherwise they wouldn't find new food. But they actually lose the ability to drive and check out their surroundings. And the same happens in humans. If the production is down, you're essentially in a depression-like what's called a depression-like state, and you don't want to essentially see new things, learn new things. You're not curious, and curiosity, psychological resilience, the ability to memorize and even to think are all necessary requirements if you want to defend yourself against any threat from macroorganisms, which are usually coming on two legs for humans. I mean, they are the most dangerous species to humans are other humans. And to be able to interact with other humans in an acceptable way, in an socially acceptable way to find solutions in critical situations, you need all these functionalities. And that's why I call the production of these new nerve cells in the hippocampus with all their functionalities, I call the mental immune system.
You can tell you've done this because you're so good at doing it. Now, my next question, darling, is you want to tell me a little bit about how when the news comes in and the stress and the climate change and the worry, how that affects your own memories. And also, if you want to go into the piece about how when you don't have enough index neurons, the narrative becomes part of your identity. So those two pieces.
Yeah. So the mental immune system works very closely together with our physical immune system, which consists of our immune cells. So for example, we have immune cells in our brain whose function is to monitor maybe the invasion of viruses, bacteria, or any other harmful event, even stress on the nerve cells themselves. So these cells monitor it, and if they see there is maybe damage to nerve cells, for example by stroke, or if somebody hit you on the head, or if there's a virus maybe able to enter the brain via the blood-brain barrier, then there is an innate part of the immune system, the physical immune system. They're called glia cells or glia cells. Glia, I don't know how to pronounce them in English, but anyway, these cells are in the brain, and they are part of the physical immune system, and they have a receptor which is called TLR4, toll-like receptor. The name doesn't mean anything. This is historic, has something to do with Drosophila research. But the function of this receptor, TLR4, there are many TLRs, we have, I think, 17 of them. But TLR4 is on the surface of these cells, and it's kind of a pathogen recognizer. It recognizes if there is any harm to the brain. And there are two different types of patterns he recognizes, and either pathogens, they are called pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PAMs. And there are other type of pathogens or damages to the brain, and they are called danger-associated molecular patterns like DAMs. And DAMs, for example, are created when nerve cells are too much stressed. But also, if a virus enters the brain, it is instantaneously recognized by the TLR4, and then either DAMs or PAMs, whatever is recognized, activates these cells, and the cascade goes into the nucleus of this or these cells, where genes are activated, which we call pro-inflammatory cytokines. For example, interleukin-6, interleukin-1, interleukin-17, TNF-alpha, and many others. And they are activated and essentially activate the immune system to fight against this invasion or to get rid of the damage that has been done to the brain for whatever reason. And so that's a good thing. And of course, it's important at that point that we are not curious, that we are not seeking new adventures, but rather maybe stay in bed until the healing process is done. So what these pro-inflammatory cytokines do is they shut down the hippocampus. And they do so by essentially inhibiting the adult hippocampal neurogenesis, which in an acute situation is not a bad thing, maybe. So evolutionary, that is maybe the reason why it's happening at all. But of course, it's a completely different situation if this situation is chronic. So if you're chronically invaded by viruses or something that looks like a virus, doesn't have to be the whole virus, maybe just the pattern itself that is recognized. For coronaviruses, for example, the pattern that is recognized is a portion, the outer portion of the spike protein, which we call the S1 subunit. It's sufficient to trigger the activation of TLR4. And of course, even any stress on the brain, that, for example, if you have a low psychological resilience and we hear dangerous narratives situations that might come in the future that might kill us or kill people which are close to us. In such situation, we essentially have a stressful event in the brain that leads to an overactivity of nerve cells. The nerve cells which are overactive release substances which are usually not released, so that for the TLR4, it looks like the brain itself has been damaged. And this also leads to an activation of TLR4, with the same consequence that at the end we have an overproduction of pro-inflammatory cytokines. By the way, these pro-inflammatory cytokines are the same ones that are relevant or are key for what we call the cytokine storm in severe COVID. So if these cells are activated by constant psychological stress or constant presence of the spike protein or the S1 subunit, which is either produced and invades the brain by inflammation, or by infection, or by injection of these stuff that is given to us in this injection program, which I call spiking. Officially, it's called immunization against coronaviruses, but we all know that that if it really would work, one injection would be sufficient for a decade or so, but we need it every few months. And there's actually a reason for that, but it's a different story, that it actually harms the immune system, so that it for a certain time being cannot produce a cytokine storm. And so this harmful event on the immune system essentially is what we call, what is then by the officials regarded as a good thing, but it's actually a bad thing. And because it will harm in the long term the immune system, so that cancer and other things are not, the surveillance is not working, and we see all kind of harmful collateral damage. But the primary cause that I see is the attack on the immune system, the mental immune system, because once this stuff is in the body and produced by our body cells, and is then able, after its production through the blood flow to enter the brain, there it finds the TLR4 and activates the immune system. And since it's a very stable protein, it was shown it stays there for months, maybe even a year, you have essentially a downregulation of the adult hippocampal neurogenesis. And you have to imagine, it's not like this is happening suddenly. We are living in a modern culture where we have many, many deficits far away from our natural lifestyle, meaning that these deficits and the requirements necessary to have a high productive adult hippocampal neurogenesis, all these necessities are not met by our modern lifestyle. Just to give you an example, if you want to build new nerve cells, you need building blocks. And one of the key building blocks, many, are, for example, high-end omega-3 fatty acids. Docosahexaenic acid, for example, DHA. And if we have a lack of DHA, then actually the hippocampus is smaller than it could be. And the optimum DHA level is 11% relative concentration of this fatty acid compared to all other fatty acids. Sorry for that. For all other fatty acids in the membranes of our cells. And for example, we can measure it in the erythrocytes. And in the membrane of erythrocytes, if ideal would be 11%, would be DHA and EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, two high-end omega-3 fatty acids. 11% is ideal. It's also what the placenta tries to give the child when it's in development in the womb. So 11% is ideal for the brain. 2% is not acceptable for life. So you would die if you are below 2%. Nobody has below 2%. 11% is ideal. But between 2% and 11%, there is, there are many possibilities. And in America, for example, the average is about 4%. In Germany, it's like 4 to 4.5%. And we know the highest level is 11% is ideal for the highest volume of the hippocampus, for the best neurogenesis rate, for the best ability to think and to memorize. PISA study, for example, show that the umbilicus cord omega-3 index, if it's close to 11%, because the woman eats enough omega-3 fatty acids, then the children have the highest score in the PISA study. And just to give you an example how important that is. But as I said already, we have only 4 to 4.5% in many modern societies, like in the United States or Germany, and many others. And you find the numbers in my book. That explains why the hippocampus is not working as well. And instead of a growth rate, which is maybe 1 to 2, maybe even 3% per year in the adult, we have a shrinkage rate in the modern societies of 1.4%, a clear indicator that that we are not living up to our natural needs. And there are many needs, for example, more physical activity, more social activity. Omega-3 fatty acids are just one example of what the requirements are in our food. There are many which are not met, vitamin D, for example, and many others, depending on your individual lifestyle. Sleep is very important because that's where the growth really happens. And so many things are necessary, and we don't meet them. And so we have a sort of a growth rate in the hippocampus when we have an average shrinkage rate. And that was already happening before COVID started. And so we have a situation where COVID essentially met a society which in general had a diminished mental immune system. And in my opinion, that was the main reason why it was even accepted by the broad society, because you have to remember system 2, the ability to be curious, to think, and to argue, and to put into question what is given to you. This ability requires the mental energy, and this in a broad part of society, it was just not there. So the only way to react to a threat is by system 1. And system 1 are cortical reflexes, either learned or inborn. And one of the inborn reflexes that that are natural to us is that if we are threatened, we seek the group. We are not trying to be individualized anymore. So we go back to the group. And if the authorities tell us the whole group is now vaccinated, then of course we also want to be vaccinated. If the whole group does this, then we also want to be part of the whole group. And that would be our natural reflex. And if we have to help others by getting these injections, then we help others without any questions asked. And so by understanding how system 1 and system 2 work and how they work together and require the ability of the hippocampus, we can really conclude that we were in 2019 not prepared for something like this. And this will continue. And that's why the key issue in my book that I'm trying to convince people is to boost their mental immune system. And we know we can do this because the production of new nerve cells can always be reactivated. This is also one of the themes if you want to treat somebody with depression, you can talk to him a lot. You can do a lot of psychological intervention, but at the end, you have to activate, by all means, the production of new nerve cells in the hippocampus to boost the resilience, to activate the curiosity, and the ability to heal whatever the problem was that caused the depression on the psychological level. But physically, you have to do that. And even it was shown already that even Alzheimer's, as a consequence of a non-functioning adult hippocampal neurogenesis, not for just a few weeks or months, but over decades. That's why it's actually a disease of older people usually. This is not because it's caused by age, but it's caused by a long process that takes several decades to shrink the hippocampus to a size where we cannot essentially cope with anything anymore and lose our memory. So given all these informations, it was clear in 2019 we already had, based on this, on the decades of negligence, ignorance,
Negligence, yes.
negligence,
Ignorance. Okay.
ignorance of the necessities what our brain needs, particularly the hippocampus needs, because the hippocampus is the most vulnerable part of our brain because it produces new nerve cells, and to grow something is always has more requirements than just to keep a steady state. So, and if this growth is not happening, then we have to expect high depression rates and high Alzheimer's rates, and they were on an all-time high in 2017 already, and I predicted with the measures in 2020 that these rates will go up, and there's actually a paper published which shows that the rise, for example, in the US was threefold from 2019 to 2020. And I also, of course, looked at Alzheimer's, and in Germany, there's every few years they make a survey on the rates on Alzheimer's, and in 2018 was compared to 2021. I did this in the book. And in 2021, we had an increase of incidence of Alzheimer's in that year compared to the year 2018 by almost 31%. And 31% increase. And not only that, since Alzheimer's is not a cause by age, but more by a lifelong, inadequate lifestyle, then what we see now with the changes in 2020 and 21, because these inflammation caused by in 21 by the injection program has, of course, effect on the development of Alzheimer's. It accelerates it. And what we see actually is not only by the acceleration and increase in the numbers, but also that even more younger people develop Alzheimer's. So the crucial year when I learned about Alzheimer's in med school was 65. 65 plus is where you expect Alzheimer's to develop. But in the survey of 2021 showed that the first time 100,000 cases, new cases of Alzheimer's below the age of 65. And that is almost 20% of all cases. So in summary, it was clear Alzheimer's and depression were high before the COVID. I wouldn't even call it pandemic, but whatever happened there, which they made a pandemic out of it. Everything was happening because our mental immune system was down, and it was further down by the measures. And the key problem that we have is that people without productive generation of these index neurons usually avoid thinking, just want to live their routine, but they were not allowed to live their routine. They were essentially bombarded with narratives that people couldn't ignore because they were always life-threatening. Either you and your beloved ones will die of COVID, or and it's a global war. We have to fight against COVID, and we all have to do things, strange things every day. Particularly in the beginning, it was amazing. I mean, the virus was very dangerous past 8:00 p.m., but only for certain people, not for others. For example, I was not allowed to visit my mother, but my mother was allowed to visit me, and really strange things. But you had to understand and learn all these things, because otherwise you might get into trouble with police. And so you were forced to learn all these strange things in a situation where you had no new index neurons. And the only way you can memorize these things, and of course you do that, memorize these things, is by overriding pre-existing memories. And the consequences of this overriding process is clear. You essentially reduce your individuality, your personality, and if this happens over weeks, months, years, then at the end you are everything you remember is the fear of all these events. You know everything about these narratives, and you have no way to compare what's going on to times prior to that. So that's a very dangerous situation you are in. And if I look at this from the outside, the world has experienced many times type of societies where certain not technocrats but dictators try to enforce certain things on people, being a communism, a fascism, or other things. But at that time, there was always at least the possibility to look over the fence and see that life could be different. But now it's extremely dangerous, because what's happening here is that there is no other side anymore, because it's global. Everybody is attacked. Everybody is forced to learn this. And then, of course, if there's no physical other side, there's at least a mental other side, which is our history, our knowledge from our past. But if that is erased as well, then there is nothing where you can look and see that the world could be different. And then we come into a state which is very close to what Aldous Huxley described in Brave New World, where we all are uniform creatures devoid of a mental immune system. And the funny thing is, to develop these humans in Brave New World, of course, they are not produced by humans anymore. They're produced in bottles. And in these bottles, to diminish their mental capacity, depending on what type of tasks are expected from these beings, they are deprived of oxygen. And we know actually that the hippocampus is the part of the brain that is most vulnerable to oxygen deprivation. So even Aldous Huxley at the time couldn't know what the hippocampus does. It was not discovered functionality at the time, but of course people knew the hippocampus exists, but nobody knew what it was doing. It was decades later, but he already had an idea how to diminish the mental capacity of people to make them accepting a state which is eternal, because there's nobody there who can change it again. There's no mental immune system, and even if there's somebody who wakes up, as in his book, then they are sent on a type of a gulag, type of an island, where they can talk to each other, but are not able to interfere with history anymore.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. You gave me exactly what I need, Dr. Nehls. It seems like maybe your lithium can help us.
Yeah. When we talk about what is necessary for the hippocampus or all our bodily function to act and function well, and the hippocampus is just one example where we can look at and see what's necessary to stay healthy. And of course, if once you have a healthy hippocampus, you also will have a healthy heart and healthy muscles and a healthy liver and a kidney, and because the functionalities of our mind and of our body are identical. So even our mental immune system and our physical immune system require the same substances. I'll give you an example: vitamin D. If you have a lack of vitamin D, then the physical immune system is not balanced. And if you, for example, a virus enters your body, it can overreact. And that's the overreaction we call a cytokine storm. And this is why it was already shown very early that if you increase your vitamin D level, you avoid the cytokine storm, and essentially COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 is harmless. This also explains why the authorities try to convince us that nobody needs vitamin D. Even the New England Journal of Medicine published in 2022 that nobody needs vitamin D, even if he has a deficiency. And people should stop taking vitamin D, and doctors should stop measuring vitamin D or recommending vitamin D. It's really a New England Journal of Medicine.
Darling, it's almost as if they want us to die.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to, if you want to, let's put it this way, if you want to install a new operating system on society, which is comparable to the one described in Brave New World, where we just accept a happy life under the rules of a technocratic world controlling system, which would be in the future an artificial intelligence. Nothing that Aldous Huxley could think about, but there's not much of a difference. But the point is, if you want to install a new operating system, as within computers, you have to essentially erase the previous one. And the erasure of the previous one is described in my book, which happens when you override the index neurons. And of course, you can only get people to accept these changed these changes in the societal behavior, like in 2020, or even accept an experimental injection program willingly. Can only do that if you install fear in people. Of course, you can just by propaganda tell people that people die from COVID. Nobody has to die for the propaganda, but at the end, you need some people who really die from COVID, not only ones which are PCR positive. You need really people who die and you can make pictures of. So in order to have people die, you have to create a situation where they have deficiencies in their immune system, the physical immune system, that they actually die from COVID. And it was long known, even from for influenza, that the major reason is a dysbalance in the reaction to the threat, to the microorganism. And this dysbalance is usually based on a lack of vitamin D. That's also why all these respiratory diseases are seasonal and come usually in winter and have the highest peak in the early months of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, because that's when the vitamin D levels are the lowest. And it was proven beyond doubt that vitamin D is causal, and you can actually help people, even if in a state where they already have severe COVID. You can give people not vitamin D, but the vitamin D prohormone, because it acts quicker by days, and essentially avoid a severe cause and avoid death. That was all proven in peer-reviewed papers, but again, you need people to die, otherwise you cannot install this whole program, and you cannot have them accept a world government, maybe by the World Health Organization or by the World Economic Forum, or a combination thereof, UN or whatever. So that this acceptance requires a mental reset, and the mental reset requires the injection program, and the injection program requires the pandemic, and the pandemic requires people to die. And so it's required that you make people, install in people a fear that if they take vitamin D, they might be killed by overdosing or whatever, which is of course ridiculous unless you really overdose it. But you can overdose everything, even water, or just sodium chloride. I mean, there are many ways to kill yourself with overdosing. Why is vitamin D an exception to the rule? I don't, or something more traumatic than anything else? I don't understand. But anyway, so vitamin D is one thing we need, but there's another trace element, another, let's say, important element or micronutrient, and that is what lithium. Not the lithium that we take into that people are getting in high amounts when they are manic depression, when they have a bipolar disorder. Here they get hundreds of milligrams, doses which are almost toxic, or let's say, put it this way, they are so close to toxic that the therapeutic window is approximately 1.5, meaning you have a Gauss curve of, let's say, toxicity with a peak at a certain amount, and then you have a Gauss curve of some kind of benefit that people are calmed down when they're manic, but these curves are overlapping essentially, very close together, so that essentially nobody who is treated by lithium at the high dose is without any side effects. And that's why people have fear of lithium. But lithium is very natural to us, and it's part of our basic food when the brain actually developed to its highest functionality. That was in prehistoric times, in the in a time of around 200,000 up to 100, about 70,000 before our time, when there was an ice age and people were forced in Africa to essentially migrate to the coast and survive there. And there they ate a lot of fish and fruits of the ocean, mussels and so forth. And it is known that in the ocean, the lithium concentration is almost 100-fold higher than in seawater, in fresh water. And it's a little bit accumulation takes place into the muscles of the fish. And so if you eat, let's say, 200 to 300 grams of fish a day, you get 1 to 2 milligrams of lithium daily. And it was shown that lithium acts actually as a trace element. And even the World Health Organization says, yeah, it is an essential trace element for goats and for rats. The goats and rats, for them, it's essential. And I was able to show that it's essential even for microorganisms, but not for humans, strangely. But the function of lithium is very important because it interferes with the activation of TLR4. So if TLR4 is activated in the brain by the spike protein, for example, or the S1 subunit after injection or infection, in one case, the psychological outcome we call post-vac or brain fog. In the case of you get an infection, we call it long COVID or post-COVID or long COVID. But in both cases, I call it spikopathy because it's essentially the activation of TLR4. And TLR4 signals to the nucleus of the cells to produce these pro-inflammatory cytokines that I talked about. But this transfer of the information from the cell surface, TLR4, to the nucleus has a cascade of signal molecules. And one central signal molecule in this cascade is called GSK3 beta, glycogen synthase kinase 3 beta. GSK3 beta. The name is not important. What is important is that the natural inhibitor of GSK3 beta is lithium. So it dampens essentially the reaction. And so when I read, or let's put it this way, this neuroinflammation is caused by this cascade. And it's a major cause of depression and Alzheimer's. It was clear to me, and it's published in papers, that low-dose lithium is able to halt the Alzheimer's process and is also helpful in depression. So, and you only need microdoses for that. Let's say 0.5 milligram to 1 milligram is sufficient. So, and that's exactly the dose we would eat every day if we were to eat fish, like 200 to 300 grams of fish from the ocean, not from freshwater lakes and rivers. Anyway, we don't do that anymore. We shouldn't, of course, because fish is not valuable for us anymore because there's not enough fish for 8 billion people. But there's also, even if there were enough fish, then it's highly toxic to eat 200 to 300 grams fish a day because we pollute the oceans. So anyway, there's an alternative just to eat lithium as a micronutrient, as a supplement. And I do this actually for many, many years, and I published this already in my paper in Unified Theory of Alzheimer's Disease, why it's helpful for many reasons. It helps to rejuvenate the brain, activates what we call autophagy, which is a process, I think 2014, a Nobel Prize was given for the discovery that we can actually clean our cells from debris of non-functional parts of it, like mitochondria that are not which are not working anymore, but also proteins which are misfolded. And there's even an indication now that by lithium intake, you can actually get rid of the spike protein maybe in the brain, that by microphagia. But most importantly, it activates, by inhibiting GSK3 beta, it activates at the adult hippocampal neurogenesis. So it has several functions. It helps to keep the brain young. It helps to activate the adult hippocampal neurogenesis, and it interferes with the main inhibitor of adult hippocampal neurogenesis, the neuroinflammation. And so I was not surprised. Actually, I wrote a book in 2021. It's called The Corona Syndrome. It's only published in German. But there I show that besides vitamin D, also lithium could help people to overcome or to prevent severe COVID. And the paper in 2020 was published where they gave people who went into the hospital with severe COVID, severe enough that they couldn't stay at home anymore. So they were essentially taken up by the hospital. They went into the COVID ward, and there the doctors essentially tested the usefulness of lithium. So they treated all people, all the patients equally, but randomized half of them and gave half of them, in addition to the standard therapy, lithium. A little bit higher dose than is essential, like 40 milligrams or so, I think twice a day. But these 40 milligrams immediately stopped the production of the cytokines. Essentially they recovered very quickly. The time they spent in the hospital was halved, and nobody, compared to the control group, nobody had to go to intensive care, and nobody died. So it was clear proof that lithium does what it should do. And so I was not surprised when I read a paper, at least it was actually a press release from the University of Buffalo, north of New York, where a scientist who works also on Parkinson and Alzheimer's, a doctor and physician and scientist, he realized also that lithium might be useful. And so he gave people with long COVID lithium, low dose. And after a few days, the brain fog disappeared by 9 of 10 people he treated. And so immediately I realized I cannot wait for my book to be published on the essentiality of lithium. But I have to give this information out so everybody can go to my Substack or to my website. And there's a huge article with all the scientific evidence on everything I just discussed and reported about. And meanwhile, I gave a lot of lectures on lithium. Some of them were on YouTube. Hundreds of thousands of people have watched them, tested them, and I get emails on a daily basis from doctors and patients who see dramatic effects. So it's clear that it works. And now we're in this strange situation that, for example, in the United States, you can get lithium over the counter, but still it's not essential, so people don't think it's important, even though it is essential and it is important. And in Germany, because it's not accredited as an essential trace element, we are not even allowed to provide it as a supplement. So we have to actually get a prescription by a doctor, and you have to find a pharmacy who actually produces you the 1 milligram of lithium, which I recommend actually as lithium orotate. It's a salt, and orotate is also actually a molecule that is required for adult hippocampal neurogenesis. So you have an advantage here, besides that the orotate is actively transported into the brain over the blood-brain barrier. So you need very little lithium orotate to get a lot of lithium into the brain and stop the neuroinflammation. So that's another trace element or essential element that we don't eat usually, and we don't find any other relevant source in our food. There are some mineral waters which have lithium in there. The most famous one is actually 7-Up. And the reason why it's called 7-Up is very interesting. It upregulates the mood, that's why it's up. And the 7 comes from the atomic number of lithium. Actually, the source is the original source where 7-Up was produced. The fountain is called Lithia. Yeah, and but anyway, I don't think there's lithium in there anymore. It's not allowed. But
are you going to California?
Sorry?
Are you going to California?
Me to California, not for the moment. At the moment, it's not planned. But
I was just going to say, there's a resort there called Two Bunch Palms. It used to be owned by Al Capone. It has a natural lithium spring.
Okay. Yeah,
And
there's lithium springs in Japan where people have like 10 to 50 milligrams per liter, and they go there for sometimes for a few weeks just to recover their mental abilities again. It's
It is amazing. It's like
yeah.
I was going to say, it's amazing.
I realized with my book when I gave a lot of talks in Germany that we live in a kind of a bubble, you know. I mean, it's like almost like a black hole with the event horizon. Outside this horizon, nobody listens, nobody understands what's going on. And one way to essentially fish, you know, people bait them into the black hole is I had to give them a bait, you know, I had to give them something. And I realized if I go out with the lithium idea, then people who even believe everything that the narrative tells them, at one point they suffer enough that they are willing to accept that there might be an alternative treatment. And if we are successful, then we tell them that we are the ones helping you and not the others. And once they start to believe one thing, then they might start to believe other things as well.
Suffering is an amazing way for people to wake up. And I love the idea that the lithium is a Trojan horse, that they will take that to feel better, but it will also, help reduce the problem. I mean, it's really, really interesting. My friend who's a philosopher says the solution, the Gordian knot, right? The solution is always tied up in the problem. Okay. And so the problem is that people have are feeling so terrible that they'll do anything not to, which is that you found the cure for the big, you know what I mean? It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
That's absolute. It's really helpful, and and in the long run, I mean, I started to work on Alzheimer's, not to be perfectly honest, but I I cared about this about the world as a place where I want my children and my grandchildren to live well, you know, and prosper, and but I cannot do this on my own, and I cannot, you know, create a little garden where they live happily ever after. We have to work all together, and so I have to encourage everybody to, yeah, live a life that is more in line with nature. And so I said, I need something that attracts them to this new way. And I really hope that if I give them some lessen the fear on Alzheimer's, that because here you can just change a few things and you will not get Alzheimer's. But by doing that, particularly people who are not having Alzheimer already, but people very early who just like 30, 40 years old fear they get Alzheimer's. And usually when they fear they get Alzheimer's, they are right to be fearful because they already feel that their lifestyle is not really healthy to them, but they don't kind of express it. And when you give them a chance to change that, you change all of their brain. And once their brain starts to realize what is necessary for them, for example, when you start, it's very difficult to start hiking, yeah, or doing sport when you never do sport. But once you have done this for a few weeks, you actually start to miss it. And so that's for many things. Once you have changed it, you don't want to revert to the old person again. And at one point, you realize it's not only sane mens and sane corpore. I mean, a healthy mind in a healthy body. You also need sane natura, I mean, a healthy nature and in a healthy surrounding. And you become more aware that it's not acceptable how the world is changing. And then I hope we together can actually change the world to a better place. And that's exactly why I started to work on Alzheimer's. And this is why I wrote The Indoctrinated Brain, yeah, to change the world.
Once you're on Tucker, I mean, the world will know, darling. You know what I mean? The world will know.
Mm.
It will, Elon Musk will be ringing you up. You know what I mean? Your life is going to change. This is like the biggest interview in the world. Like he's bigger than Rogan. Corvin and I were talking about how to get you on Rogan, and it's really Tucker now, So um you're doing it. You are changing the world, my love. You are changing the world.
No, not without your help.
My tiny help. I'm trying, darling. I'm trying. I'm sending it to everybody. And I've got my audience. I'm going to get this out here. And as I said, I'm blessed and I'm so grateful.
Tucker Carlson wouldn't have invited me if I hadn't given a few other interviews before that. So yes. I think each one helps the other, and it's kind of building up, And
it does.
That's why I am very grateful for everybody who's willing to talk to me and spread the word.
Well, it's my pleasure, darling. My pleasure. And you keep safe. And I am sending you lots of love and protection. And thank you so much. And I'll do what I can. If I think there's somebody, I'll absolutely send them your way. And look after yourself, my love. I'm going to buy some lithium right now.
Yeah, it's very important. I mean, my whole family takes it. For example, I just lost my first grandchild half a year ago. So my son and his girlfriend, they're not married, but they live here in the house in an apartment in my house here, and they just lost a child. And I realized there are publications out there that lithium helps you overcoming the problem if a loved one dies. That you don't not succumb to depression and long-term post-traumatic syndrome. So I immediately gave them high doses of lithium, and it was amazing what happened to them. I mean, they really came out of the depressed state very quickly. I mean, it's not that it overcomes the issue, but it helps them to cope with it better and to learn better and to find a way through life again.
The thing is, it's like that. I think there's a saying, it's no sign of healthiness to be sane in an insane world or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I personally, luckily your book had a happy ending, right? But the ramifications of Bill Gates spending money to do research on Hippocampus to figure out how to do that. Like, you know what I mean? The degree of evil that is going on in this world can get you very depressed. I mean, I really do. I have bouts myself. So I'm going to go and get the lithium because sometimes it just gets to you. It gets to you. And I mean, there is a war on us, darling. It's a war on us. Yeah. And we didn't ask for it. We just wanted to live our lives. And like you said, whatever, go forward and multiply. But,
Well, perfectly honest, I believe if we are not destroyed by this war against us, we will come out better than we were before, because it's totally clear. In summertime 2019, the world was not good at that time already. Culture was developing in the totally wrong direction. It's not that we need a new way of developing our culture and a culture in line with nature, and not a culture that is indoctrinated on us, but that each person, each individual, each family, each society can choose for themselves. But I'm pretty sure if we learn enough from this crisis, we will be able to create a better world for all of us.
From your lips to God's ears, darling. I hope so. Thank you so much, Dr. Nehls. I really, really appreciate it. And
call me Mike.
I will send people your way. I'm going to spread the word, and I will read your Substack. I'll share your Substack. I'm going to do my part, my dear. So thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much.